go. And hello, welcome to Leading Dragons, the place and the platform where fearless leaders share their stories and insights and learnings to accompany and encourage other leaders to step into their authenticity and lead in their truth. And today we have a guest all the way from Brisbane, Australia. Hello, Michael.
Well, Deborah, thank you for having me.
Welcome, and it's lovely to have you, Michael. Thanks for staying up late. So it's night time where you are.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's only 6:30, so not too late.
All right, yeah, okay. So you're 8 hours ahead of where I'm sat. So Michael, you've got a really interesting name. Your surname has got 4 A's in it, Kwaaitaal. Is that right? Did I pronounce it right?
Yes. Kwaaitaal, it's Dutch. So we pronounce the A's as long A's.
Kwaaitaal, love it. And does it have any particular meaning?
It does actually. It's also a bit of an interesting story. So literally translated, it means kwai means mad or angry, and taal means language. So and I've only just recently sort of figured that out. That's in my name that I have to speak up against the status quo, and I have to be angry with my language. But then my first name, of course, is Michael, which is the name of an angel. So I'm internally conflicted.
So it's the yin and the yang. So
I guess so.
Okay, Michael. So let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about who you are. You as a Dutchman living in Australia as well, and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Well, where shall I start? I just had a relatively normal childhood, close to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Just went through school, was never a particularly good student. But I was always interested in travel and in worldly things. My mom was a flight attendant, so we got to see some of the world at a young age. So my career choice was quite specific. I wanted to either join an airline or an international company, and something that had a future. And I ended up in a Canadian software firm just by looking at an ad in the paper that said, "Who wants to grow with us? We have real tools. These are not toys." And I just started out of school, and I couldn't expect to have the most amazing career. The company grew quite spectacularly. We were at one stage the absolute world leader in business intelligence tools. So we sold software to the world's largest enterprises, particularly their CFOs. And me starting in finance, I sort of was on the cutting edge of technology for finance professionals. So went through the ranks relatively quickly. I got on the board of the Dutch firm when I was 28 with 0 experience. Then before I knew it, I was looking after 16 legal entities in Europe. And then the company asked me to become the CFO for Asia Pacific, which was our fastest growth region. So that made me travel around the world, but then also ultimately land in Sydney, from where continued the growth, and we started acquiring companies. And then back in 2007, I've been there for 15 years. It was in my late 30s, and had enjoyed quite some success. But my priorities changed. I'd met an Aussie girl, and we started a family. So I walked away from the career and relocated to Paradise, the holiday destination, and took a few years off. And that's when I started getting interested in finding my true purpose.
Your true purpose. So what is your true purpose?
Yeah, great question. I'll tell you once I know. No, it's a
it's a trick question.
It's interesting. Yeah, but it was definitely a fundamental change. I sort of felt secure walking away from my career because I just knew I'd overachieved on what I'd ever set out to achieve. So and I'd had made some money in the process. So we were able to comfortably relocate, and it took some time. I took about 3.5, 4 years off work, partially planned and partially not so planned. but very lucky to spend that time with my young children in a beautiful place. I ended up spending a lot of time in the garden. I became interested in gardening and in nature. And that really gets you to think differently about all sorts of things. So Noosa is well known as beautiful national parks, and you can go on a weekday. It's only a small town, but it's sort of an exclusive holiday destination for Australians. And you can go there in the morning at 5 a.m. and take a paddleboard off Main Beach, and then you'll be paddling with dolphins, and there's all sorts of wildlife in the area. It's a stunning spot to really connect with other things, with nature, with sunrise, and yeah.
That's going to have to
and
be
that's sort of where you start thinking about how. Yeah, it's a great place, and it's also, I guess, the children made a big change. I mean, up until that time with Cognos, I was essentially the end goal of any organization on the share market is to please the shareholders. So in essence, I was fueling corporate greed with what I was doing, and I started thinking about that differently. And then my life in Noosa was, hey, this sunrise is free. And my pedalboard, I bought it from a shop, but I can do this for free. And we started growing our own veggies. We started having chooks, having eggs, and our life was pretty complete without the need for any more board meetings or international strategic planning sessions all the way over the world, and all that heaviness of running a corporate job. So I really started rethinking about, hey, I've got all this knowledge, what I want to do, and I made the biggest mistake of my life, and that was to join a government organization.
Interesting. And why was that the biggest mistake in your life?
Well, I think it was, I say that facetiously, but I had great intentions going in. I was actually headhunted by a recruiting firm saying, hey, this is a government startup. They're doing a big restructure of a public service. And they need someone that can handle complexity, finance systems, payroll systems, understands taxation, blah, blah, blah. And is good with IT, with systems. So I put my hand up for it, and initially it was actually great fun. I learned a lot about how government can work well, to do things properly. But then as time moves on, it started becoming a traditional style bureaucracy, and then it became difficult. There was just no room for having your own say. It all had to be controlled from the top, and that's when I started realizing how fortunate I had been with the autonomy I'd had in my early role in the private sector. That in any sort of government institution that just doesn't exist, because I got to work with a lot of other governments, state level, local level, so there's council level, local government, and then even federal government as well. And you just start noticing that, there's, well, in the corporate world, everything's about greed. In the public world, everything is about politics, ultimately. So all these government entities, they roll up into an election and a political figure. And and those are both, I started struggling with the construct of management in dominance hierarchies.
So let's just pause there, Michael, because we will be talking about constructs. So today you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've left the corporate world. You have no intention of returning, at least not as on the payroll as a CFO.
Exactly.
And you've created one KPI. Tell us more about one KPI and your motto about simplifying business.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. So the idea was essentially born in Noosa on one of those early morning pedals while I was working for the government, to really ask myself, like, hey, who is in charge, and why do we do what we do in organizations? And also I started asking, how do I best measure success? So previously it was like in the private sector, it was very clear that it was all about money, and the more money you made, the more successful you were seen to be. and it also could have something to do with your title, I think, from the outside. And I started, and I was never really interested in any of those things. So because I started so young, I just didn't really have a big ego, and that maybe a bit of a Dutch cultural thing as well. But yeah, so with one KPI, I really started thinking, how am I going to measure my success in life? And because I had young children at the time, I started really looking at, hey, this life's not so much about me anymore, or about even my generation. It's more about how do we pass the world over to future generations, and what can I do to help my children so that they don't have to put up with some of the inefficiencies and underperformance of and the problems that we face in the world, because I just didn't think there was a need for all that complexity sometimes. And one KPI was really about asking organizations, how do you measure your ultimate success if you're only allowed to have one measure? And it was essentially a consulting process that we took on in the software company with Cognos. We used to have strategy maps, I guess, in strategic sessions where we applied the balanced scorecard as a business principle. So not just look at financial performance, but also look at the performance in people, in learning, and internal processes and customer satisfaction. And I've just taken all that knowledge and simplified it in a very simple system that guarantees exponential growth, but ultimately arrives at one single measure. And yeah, that sort of requires some consulting work, and it can be a small business or a large one, doesn't really matter, to take all the complexity out and end up with a very simple way to run the business.
And I mean, that's just we're brilliant at making everything extremely complex, and you wonder if there's not like a hidden agenda behind that, just to create matrices and all sorts, pulls in all sorts of directions, so that it becomes virtually impossible to untangle yourself, let alone think clearly about the best way forward. And I really love your motto. I simplify business by cultivating spiritual intelligence. Now, Michael, you, who's a Dutchman, very pragmatic, formerly a successful CFO in information systems, particularly, you've gone from dollars, hard currency, to SQ. So from IQ to EQ to SQ, we're talking about SQ. And honestly, I first and foremost, I want to say that I really honor your bravery and your courage to just put it out there and to connect the human spirit to organizations. And you're not even disguising it in different words. You're just saying SQ. Tell us a little more about SQ. And how on earth did you get from, hard currency to SQ today?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Debs, because I've asked myself that, but I think it just came naturally to me. And I think the shift from the corporate world to nature and a more of an interest in art had something to do with it. There's a few other pointers that I could mention, but I think I just look at us as individuals, as equals, and that's sort of culturally ingrained in me in the Netherlands. It's a very tolerant and equal society, and so I think that every single human being is equally has the capacity to tap into an equal amount of intelligence. I don't think that intelligence can be measured by standardized tests in schools. Because there's also a thing that is creative intelligence. So an artist, for instance, whether it's a musician or a film director or a painter, there's a level of, or you could say a hierarchy or degree of intelligence into creating an artwork. And I think that also translates to spirituality. So I wasn't raised religiously, and I have challenged the status quo in many situations, and even in my religious education, I said, well, if there's so many religions, why are you teaching us this one? Because what makes that this one's right and the other ones are wrong? And there was just no, so it was a valid question. And for me, so I've spent most of my career in my left brain, I was also, I should mention, a champion in the Rubiks Cube when I was 12 in the Netherlands. So I was very good with cubes, and that's when I started working for big corporations. We had data cubes. So I've always in my brain have been translating data and patterns, as we talked about earlier, into cubes essentially, and just saying, hey, these cubes have to be solved. And there's many different ways you can turn the cube, but ultimately we want all the colors to be beautiful. And in a way, that's how our brain works. And spirituality is just another dimension of the human capacity. It's just not one that we learn at school or in church.
So I was always fascinated, and I remember randomly finding myself in this huge games exhibition, and there was some Rubik's Cubes champions, and they had this. So they were all sat each at their own table, hands on the table. And then they're a bit like waiters. They came along with a tray and with a bell on the tray, and they all put the trays down with the bell still on them in front of each of the champions. And then they removed the bells all instantly, and they grabbed the Rubik's Cube, and they had to go as fast as they could. I mean, it was just so. Yeah. What makes you mentioned that you were a Rubik's Cube champion player at the age of 12. What is it that you need to have happen, going on in your brain to become a champion?
I guess, for me, I just learned the steps and practice. That was it. There was nothing. There's no magical skills, and I wouldn't have any attributes that are different in me than in anyone else. I got to play with cubes faster than other kids. It was actually a friend at school that taught me how to do it. Otherwise, I would never find out. And then I just practiced, and I cheated a bit as well. I put Vaseline in my cube, so mine just started running smoother. And that's why I became faster. So yeah.
Why not put some Vaseline in the cogs of the big corporate machines?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, and I do it with champagne breakfast. So the first thing I think, so I've had some great lessons from people in the company I worked with. And we had a great Scottish CEO at one point. He was a big Scotsman with a heavy accent. His name was Ron Zambanini. So he also had some Italian blood flowing. But he always said, hey, if you got a complex thing to do, first you got to just relax and spend 5 minutes thinking about it and drink a glass of wine, and then you start applying yourself. And with that sort of spirit in mind, I think when you put pressure on people, they just don't come up with the best results. I've learned in Noosa that my best brain capacity, I find if I go for a walk on the beach or through a national park or my paddleboard, when I'm surrounded with dolphins, everything constructed by humans falls away. You're in tune with nature. You see the sunrise, which is I'm now very spiritual around sunrise. I've started practicing with crystals. The unit that I'm in here, the sunrise is behind me at 6 a.m. in the morning. And I pour a glass of champagne and I have an intentional moment. That's my form of meditation. Some people go to the gym, they work on their muscles. I tend to work on my spiritual capacity with a glass of champagne, and it's a moment of gratitude, celebration, and saying hello to a new day.
Yeah, getting bubbles in your palate. Yeah. That's a perfect way to celebrate.
And there's that.
Start the day, champagne breakfast. So let's get into the SQ piece. Don't need to convince me. we've spoken obviously about.
I know.
Right. And you connect. So you're saying that spirituality is you mentioned earlier about religion, and they're two separate things anyway. So that's done. We can park that side. And about bringing spirituality into organizations, which is, I would say, is much needed, given that you give it a direct correlation with creativity. And this is where there are blocks and obstacles, because typically the majority of profit-making organizations, particularly, I would say also non-profit actually, because there are politics involved, like you said earlier. It's the environment that prevents creativity from happening and innovative solutions being tried out and experimented. What do you think? What can organizations start doing to bring in more spirituality?
Yeah. Well, the simplest thing is to do what spiritual teachers say, and that's learn to let go. Learn to let go of attachments that no longer serve the corporation. And we very well know what they are. And I think it's really a mindset shift, and I consider myself not special, but very lucky and privileged that I was thrown into a leadership role at a very young age. I was 25, and I got to look after people that were older than me and a team, and I got all the responsibility. And I didn't have an ego problem as a start, so I might have developed that later, but I saw my team as equals. I just was privileged and honored with the responsibility bestowed upon me, and I wanted to do it justice. So I worked day and night for that company to get the outcomes. Now, and I think that really helped me because I was never, I guess, misdirected by management. Like, I didn't have a boss telling me what to do. I was always thrown in and say, "Hey, you're a smart guy, figure it out." And I was given the space to be like that. And I think that's the thing that we need to learn in all of our hierarchies, no matter how big or small they are, is that we should just treat our employees like we would our children. Like, when kids are young, you want to protect them from harm. You don't want them to burn their fingers on the stove. So you can tell them, "Hey, don't touch that." But at some point, you're going to have to let them go. And it's your job as a parent to turn them into responsible adults on their own. And the sooner you can do that at work as a leader with your employees and say, "Hey, you came here, you've applied for this role as a responsible adult. I'm not going to have to tell you what to do. You've told me that you can do it. So here's the boundaries within which you can operate and go for your life. Don't wait for me to tell you what to do." And that takes a lot of courage and bravery as a leader. And you're going to burn yourself sometimes. That happened to me. I mean, I've had some shocking oversights that I was responsible for. It happened on my watch that I had to take on the chin. But all in all, the benefits of truly leading with confidence and inspiring your people what to do, I think that's the biggest thing that we can tell corporations now. Let go of control and start becoming confident in the true purpose of your organization, which is that one KPI. What's the most important, highest possible purpose of the organization, and let's get everybody aligned to work on that.
Yeah. And Michael, tell us, would you like to share a story where you were, you were facing a challenge, you were facing adversity, but you did not allow that fear riddle you with paralysis, and instead you worked through that fear and you became a leading dragon?
Yeah, I could pick from so many. I've had pretty touchy tax audits, for instance, where we were faced with huge penalties, where you just had to navigate through it and sort of say, this is what we did. I'll tell you a story about a situation in one of our offices in Japan, where a situation occurred where there was some contracts being recorded that weren't real contracts, let's say, and being in a North American firm that could really change the reporting of our numbers on the share market. So there were exposures at a global level that happened in Japan. I was the CFO for Asia Pacific. I had a controller in Japan, and and we all worked under complete trust. Just culturally, there were differences that, as an outsider in Japan, there's a cultural difference where people don't really say no to you, and if you're an outsider, you'll never really get how they work together. But we seemingly had good relationships, so we never anticipated this to happen. So I got woken up in the middle of the night saying, "Hey, we've got a problem. We gotta go through that," and it could have been quite an extensive exposure. And I immediately feared for my job and everything. I thought, "Oh, this is just not good." And but I also thought, "Hey, there's nothing that I actually did wrong or could have done differently. But it's really, and it was a very senior manager of mine that sort of rang up and the next day, and I thought, oh boy, now I'm in trouble. And he was really human about it. He was sort of saying, hey, how are you? I said, oh, terrible. You know, this is all happening. I've got the auditors coming in. We've got to go through all these records and figure out how bad. He says, no, I didn't want to hear that. I want to hear how you are, how you're dealing with it. And so it was a very human, personal reaching out. And because he knew that, he said, it's never what happens, it's how you respond to it. And you stepped on a plane the next day and you're there now. You've put your own life on hold. You've delegated other work to others and you're covering it up. So I just want you to know that we're all here for you. Let us know. And so I think the lesson in that was, if there's bad news, report it straight away and set the right priorities as to how you fix it. And stay human and just be be empathetic.
How did you feel? I mean, I'm talking now on a feeling level when you got that phone call from that senior manager, which was such a human call to you.
Yeah, well, at the time, and I was still in my 30s, so I was still very impressionable in a way, as even though I've had some success, but that situation hadn't occurred before. So and it was sort of a confession that sort of happened at a higher level, and then I was sort of sent into. But I felt it was on my watch as a CFO for that particular office, and initially it could have been pretty difficult at a global level, and turned out it wasn't as bad as it initially saw. But it felt a sense of, oh gee, fear, incompetence, thinking of, okay, this is it, this is the end of probably exaggerated it at the time, but these are things that happen, and it's you learn a lot from those sort of situations. And I think the thing with fear is a lot of it's just all pressures that aren't real. If you sort of dig deeper and go back to that purpose thing, we were still a great company. We still had great products. We had great clients. We were still great. And sometimes these things happen. And but we put on all of that fear on it to ourselves, and I think that's a level of. And I'll make a connection here with spiritual intelligence, because I think we're all very spiritual beings from childhood. Nobody tells us that at some point we have to walk. We do that ourselves. We work it out, and we stand up and we fall over and we practice and we do it. That's a gift that we have innately. And I think from the moment that we go to school and we start participating in society, whether it's in our families or in our clubs, we start to adopt behaviors that have been invented or practiced by others. And in a way, we unlearn some of our spiritual gifts as children. And it isn't later in life, in my case, that through some adversity and some personal trauma, that you can that you start questioning those things and reconnect the dots from your early childhood. And I think that's really what got me onto this change in my life towards letting go of everything I thought I knew about how the world worked in finance, in law. You only have to go through divorce to figure out, in Australia anyway, that the law doesn't always give justice, especially not for kids. But yeah, you learn through that, and then you start becoming more aware of, hey, I got to believe what's inside me rather than all this external stuff that's being thrown at me on the television or on the internet, and create that awareness.
Critical thinking, isn't it? And as parents, we need to be teaching our children that, because they're just, social media is just in their face 24/7. It's I remember, Michael, when we were speaking, I think it was like probably a couple of months ago, and you asked me, you said, well, I think the one question that we could ask CEOs and owners of companies is, well, or anyone working in a company, well, would you send your kids to go and work where you work? I think it was you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, gosh, that is just like, so that is like spot on. That's just like, if you can just answer that question, that says everything. That says everything about your work environment and the company ethic that you work in. So, and it's really interesting what you're saying about, like, it's like a reminder that we are star seeds. We are, we do have that spiritual intelligence when we're born and when we arrive on this planet, and then it kind of gets dumbed down and conditioned. Starting with typically our parents, and then school, and then different institutions and establishments, and then and so your quest is to shake people up and go, hey, do you remember that spiritual intelligence that you're born with? Well, it's still there. So how can people tap into it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question as well. I think so. The way I see, the easiest way to do it is to go back to nature, and I think everybody can resonate with that. Like, I'm very lucky here on the east coast of Australia. The beaches are long. There's no hassle to go there with the car, and you can park anywhere. And just being at a beach, for instance, with ocean breezes and a bit of sun, and bare feet, and walk for 5 kilometers and back at least. And you'll feel a different person. You're really, you can't help but think about nature and getting to yourself. And if you start practicing that, and some people do it through meditation. I have nothing against it. It just doesn't work for me. My brain is always on, and I have to go to nature or go and exercise or do something like that. Get on my bike. So there's that, and I think there's other things. So I fast-tracked my spirituality because I've sort of recognized it for the last 10 years that I had a gift. I just couldn't really land it. And then some things happened late last year, sometime October timeframe. And that's when I started really intentionally getting interested in spirituality and awareness, consciousness, and getting back into energy. So, and I started seeing a psychic. And I also had some friends that were energy healers that I connected with that were in San Francisco, for instance, online. And then a few things happened, and I started piecing them together. And through those experiences, I just opened up, and it was my psychic who said, "Mate, you have such deep psychic abilities." He says, "I can see it in your date of birth, your name, your astrology, but also what you've done in the past." He sort of knew everything about my life. That some gift that he has to tap into an individual, and he sort of said, you're a really good person and you want to help everyone, but you've been through a bit of your personal things, and you got to just trust your intuition. So I did. That cost me a relationship. It cost me more of my money that I was burned through. But it did give me
we say it.
But it doesn't matter, because it gave me back a sense of the ability to see through everything. So once I started trusting my intuition, I actually lost 10 kilos of weight. I started eating differently. I started exercising every day. I started exploring spirituality. I got into crystals. I got into aromatherapy and a few other things. But all of that, I went dancing again. So I went through a relationship breakdown and started dancing again, and all those things, and started becoming purposeful in nature. Like I said, I went to the beach for a bit, took some time out, and all those things combined really gave me it's almost like your heart radiates energy. Like you get sunlight through your head, and it sort of permeates through your body, and these crystals are so powerful. I mean, I never knew. As a CFO, I would have never believed any of this. But now, sort of being open to it and then practicing it, I can feel it in my body, and I can notice other people noticing. I've been out on walks where dogs are attracted by me and they hump my leg when I feel that rush of sunlight, and I can't explain it any other way than, hey, there is something there. I better start trusting the intuition.
Yeah.
And through my endeavors with my business ideas, I'm connecting with people now online, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback. And I also actually think that there's an astrology event that happened in December of last year where the planets aligned, and the age of Aquarius formally sort of kicked in. So there's a transition from masculinity in terms of energies to femininity, where the masculine energy has built the world and built the bridges and fought the wars, and now there's a mess, and now we need the feminine energy and the caring nature of the feminine to start looking after things better. So and I think that's all about balance. So it doesn't mean it's only women can do it, but it does mean that and there's been a lot of discussion and change about all this gender stuff. But I think if we talk about the energy of, we're all born from a mother and a father, so we have the qualities within us. It's just what we shine a light on and what we manifest. And once you can tap into both forms of energy and you can balance them, that's when as a leader, you're much more capable to help people along their path and shine the light on it for them.
Yeah, and that's beautifully said. And as a leading dragon, that's what we're here to do. This is our mission, which is to be the bridge now of the old constructs and the new ones. And like we say in English, don't throw the baby away with the bathwater. So there's some old constructs that still serve us today and will keep serving us. So it's recognizing which ones we need to keep and which ones we need to allow to fall away and not hang on to desperately because we don't know anything else. And accompany those new leaders into shedding what no longer serves us and corporations and institutions and governments, and create step aside of that chaos and build the new together with the old that we want to keep, on a purposeful level. Michael, we could go on. There is no time, but unfortunately we're rounding up on the hour. We could do another one. I suggest that we do another one later on this year and see where we're at. Wonderful.
Yeah, sounds great.
Michael, keep doing what you're doing, keep shining your light. Imagine all corporations moving into the one KPI, which is measuring their success with SQ across their employees. How would that be?
Yeah, I'm doing my bit. I'm at the moment I'm still a one-man band, so but I am sensing that more people are becoming somewhat more interested in a different path. Even in governments, they're really sort of interested to find another way. But yeah, it's going to take some time before some of these concepts are fully embraced, because that's just where we're at.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying. We can't. We got to keep what's working and challenge what's not. And thankfully, we have a lot of new things that are invented by school dropouts that are working. We've talked about Clubhouse, for instance, before as an idea, and I see a lot of those things starting to come together in syncretism and work out that path for us. So yeah, that was a great discussion, Debs. I enjoyed that. So hit me up again if we're a bit further along, and hopefully we can help other people shine a sort of light on their situations.
And this is why also I've created the Leading Dragons community, because we can't do it single-handedly. And together we're a lot stronger, and we're able to create the ripple impact across the world. So Michael, till next time, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.